Test.
Keys.
How you doing? Hanging in there? Need something to eat or anything?
Nah, I'm good. We'll survive.
Really appreciate you being here, Chief.
Yeah, any problem.
Aloha. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I know a few of you are still filtering in here, but thank you for being here this evening. My name is James Hustace, and I serve as your council member for District 9, Communities of North and South Kuala. So I'm really grateful for you taking the time tonight on a weeknight here on a Monday night to kind of talk about dangers and issues in our community. Grateful for our guests here, and I'll introduce them in just a moment here, but just wanted to thank you for coming out in the community, sharing your mana'o, hearing from us. You know, these are more, Chief Todd here is really the expert in the field, and we have our police officers here as well as other community members that are really the expert. And I'm the one that's kind of learning a lot of these things as we go here. But grateful to be a part of this process with you, advocate for you at the County Council, and really be a part of these conversations and dialogue. You know, we've kind of, in talking with Matt Chalker, and I'll introduce him in a moment here, but, and their conversations on a monthly basis about wildfire in our communities here. The month of May is Wildfire Awareness Month. So this is one of those reasons why we wanted to have this conversation with our fire chief and really dive into this topic and hear from you and really learn from the experts in this field. So without further ado, I just wanted to just give a quick introduction. We have our Hawaii Fire Department Chief, Kazuo Todd, with us here this evening. So please welcome Chief Todd. And then part of this conversation, and some of the reasons that some of you are here kind of are, the understanding of wildfire, are partners like Matt Chalker and the Wildfire Safety Advocates of Waikoloa. So I want to thank Matt and the Wildfire Safety Advocates for kind of partnering with me and hosting these meetings here. So mahalo, Matt. And also want to recognize some of our VIPs in the audience as well. We have our team with Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization. We have Dana, Mary, and Shelley. And if you haven't, please take a time to visit with them, talk story with them. And if you've ever done a home assessment, those are those partners in the community. Share with your neighbors, share with your friends, your families in the community about the work that they do and what it means to you and the opportunities it provides for the rest of our community. Also want to recognize our police officers here. So we have Captain Valera, Officer Cabantin, and Officer Dela Cruz. And of course, I want to thank our school here as well. I want to thank our principal here, Waikoloa School. Thank you for having us in this space. And then I just want to recognize Roger here, Roger Wursig with the Waikoloa Village Association. So thank you, Roger, for being with us this evening. But with that, I just want to, like I said, I want to thank you. You're part of this conversation and part of these dialogues about making, community resilient and how we understand the impacts in our community and trying to solve challenges together. So I'm going to talk a little bit, just a couple of bullet point things, things that are top of mind for me, for the community, representing you on the council. And then I really want to pass it off to Fire Chief Todd. He's going to really dive into some of the details about what he sees day in, day out from the community and kind of the impacts in the community and things that we can do to mitigate together. And I know Fire Chief Todd has a lot on his mind. We recently had a residential fire on the east side of the island. So those are those kind of things we're facing as we enter more of the drier season. But it's not really always in our drier communities and these arid communities. It's happening across the island. So Chief can really speak about some of that. And then of course I want to bring in Matt and some of these conversation points here too, about what he's seen in the community. You've seen Matt on the news and these conversations about trying to, drum up support, really kind of put that, the energy in community about advocating for certain things that the community needs and has asked for a long time, and all the partnerships that we have. It's really about building these relationships with each other and finding solutions. So it's really about the connectivity and as we move forward on these issues. So a lot of these conversations have been about, and a lot of the stuff we'll probably talk about today about is mitigation, about what we can do in our own personal space, but also collectively in the community here. And how we can develop strategies and then really invest in our prevention efforts as well as our defensible spaces in the community. Sitting as your council member, I was grateful to be part of the Hulu egress evacuation kind of practice event that you hold here on an annual basis. And if that's something, if you could raise your hand, if you attended that event, if you've driven down Hulu, Egress, and have experienced that area. So no, these are, thank you so much. These are those opportunities where we can familiarize ourselves with these spaces on those, urgent matters and emergency situations. And of course, there's more work to be done on that and improving that space. And of course, we can have the conversation about other infrastructure needs in the community for arterial roads and really meeting the capacity of the community here. And a lot of these things are going to be done through the partnership with community like you, and then bringing forward legislation, as well as pushing on the administration to kind of find solution and fund these opportunities. And from my perspective, as your representative in the council, we have housing projects moving forward in the Waikoloa community. You're very well aware of this. You see it every day, kind of the growth of the community. You see private landowners developing, but you're also seeing the county improve this space as well. And in that regard, the county has an obligation to provide, infrastructure and assets for the community to really assure safety for community residents. And as we're seeing that master plan for Kamakoa, we have that obligation as council and as a county to kind of ensure safety and safe evacuation for our community on those opportunities. I was also grateful to participate in the Wildfire Summit that our partners with Fire Department and Chief Todd, HWMO, and all the community and all the leadership that kind of came together to really understand the impacts in our community. The wildfires are far spread and across our islands here, and it's becoming this more common occurrence, and especially becomes more dangerous on these really extreme events, right? And these kind of really extreme events. So that opportunity and learning about those areas to engage in community, the tools that we have and the tools we can bring to the table to prevent wildfire, to protect our own homes and defensible spaces, is what we do have to do as community members. And that really is that partnership with organizations like HWMO and the fire department when you're doing those home assessments, and what we can do as individual homeowners that really adds up to the entire community. And that we are all at the end of the day responsible for each other, and that we really have a kuleana for everyone that is our neighbors and our friends and our family across the street, down the street, across the neighborhood, and what we can do to kind of kokua and work together on things. I just want to point out that they do have, and I attended their recent meeting. I know probably a number of you have attended their Ready, Set, Go program and their webinars. They have one upcoming on May 6th in the evening. So I do encourage you to sign up on their website for that webinar to learn about those home ignition zones, what you need to do about your go bags, having situational awareness. That's really our understanding of our weather events, what's around us in the community, those impacts that are going to either impede us or allow us to freely move about. So they really speak about that home prep, the yard maintenance, and really building that buffer in our own space, and then how we collectively as a community can do it going forward. I could ramble on a whole bunch of stuff, but I can jump back and forth on a couple things here. But I do want to say, before I pass it off to Matt and Chief Todd here, there are a number of things that are moving forward that I'm grateful to see. There was some news in the paper recently, so thank you, Roger, for sharing that with me, on the potential for Hawaiian Electric looking at undergrounding some of your lines in the community here, and that is a potential path forward. There was a good conversation we had in council recently when Hawaiian Electric presented to council. It was my request that Hawaiian Electric present on their wildfire mitigation plan. So this is something that they're presenting to the community as part of their practice and responsibility, especially in these areas that are high risk. They did just recently present it to the Public Utilities Commission for a review, but I did request them to present in front of council at kind of that public threshold and level. And it was really good to see the conversations happen around that with my colleagues on the dais about what is the role that our utilities play in a lot of these spaces. And there is that potential partnership of working with community to find those solutions there, with particularly with undergrounding. I think there's a path forward with that. So I'm gonna stop there because I can keep going. I want to pass it off to Chief Todd if you wanted to speak anything, Chief, about the budget and what you're kind of seeing forward as the chief when you're looking at our communities and the assets that you need, the assets that you deploy, and all that you do in the community day in, day out, and the responsibility you have at large for all of our communities, and your force of power in that. So, we'll kind of have a little brief conversation here, and I want each of them to share a few words, and then I'd love to have kind of a Q&A, an opportunity for you to ask us questions and share your thoughts on a couple things here. And so, Chief, I'll kind of share with you if you want to touch on anything, please.
Well, that's pretty broad.
Yep.
Just like to say I like to kick back in the early mornings and go fly fishing and no.
You're more responsible than that.
I think you said budget. Obviously, we're moving. So if you want to hit the mayor up for getting me more positions, I have encouraged you all to do that. Just throwing it out there. Generally speaking, when we look at the Hawaii County and the Hawaii Fire Department, I think it's important to note that when we talk about our staffing on the career side per station, we have less county funding per station than any other department in the state. So Kauai has more firefighters in a fire station on average than we do. And this is a historical thing that goes back to we're broke, and it's a very big island. And we've decided to space our fire stations out a lot farther with just less people in them. And we're in the process of trying, in theory, to catch up with that. So, the number one ask every year has always been, we'd like more firefighters. But on the opposite side of that, HFFA and SHOPO and UPW have done very good jobs on the union negotiation side. And so firefighters are relatively expensive when you look at their salaries and wages comparative to the big picture. So it has been generally through grants like AFG, which is the Assistant to Firefighter Grants, through SAFER, which has allowed us to actually add a couple more firefighters out in the field and things like that, because they basically pay for the first 3 years, and then the county has to pick it up after that. But it's been rare in my career for us to add additional firefighters, despite the fact that when I started as a firefighter over 20 years ago, we averaged around 14,000 calls a year, and today we run closer to 33,000 calls a year. But our department is not dramatically bigger than it used to be. We just work twice as hard, pretty much. And one of the issues with Hawaii County is in the early 70s or so, we decided that we were going to take on the EMS contract, and we were going to have paramedics and EMTs. And it was a good thing, because we wanted to make sure that the people of our island got the best possible medical services and everything else. And I think we did an amazing job of that. But we also had this sort of tendency, because they were also double trained as firefighters, to count them as both. And when we took on that EMS contract and we were, doing 5,000 or 6,000 calls a year, they were available to be both. Totally worked. Today, our ambulances, oftentimes come into the station, and in the first hour of the day, you can get a call and not come back for the whole day. One of the tougher shifts I worked, and this is still, a decade and a half ago, I left the station at 8:30 for my first call. They didn't come back until 5:30 the next morning after transporting like 8 or 9 people to the hospital because, we burned through. You might have seen in the paper, we just took 4 new ambulances.
Yep.
They're not like new. We're just replacing units in the field. We burned through an ambulance in approximately 4 years from brand new. And that's because we average, like in places like Puna and things like that, 80,000 plus miles per year per ambulance. So in our busier stations, like in Puna and Kailua Kona and Hilo, we can, within just 3 years, stack up 250,000 miles on one ambulance. And some of our slower stations, may take up to 5 years. But the reality is like we burn through those resources very, very quickly, which is why we need to buy them. We need to get 4 every year, essentially, just to keep up. Because I have 16 ambulances. It should be noted, if you know anyone down in the Makale region, South Kona, or even just the Kailua Kona area, we just got on Monday the Makale ambulance bill. Well, they threw the bill out, but basically they dumped the money in our funding. So I've been advocating for that, and our local legislators have been as well. So we're adding another ambulance service. So we're going to go from 16 ambulances on the island to 17. So they're putting $1.75 million in our budget to make that happen, and I'll get some paramedics and some EMTs, and we'll start working that process out. this is a deep,
Yeah,
this is a
this
deep
is
rabbit
kind of-
hole. Like we can keep
yeah.
going, right? On the fire side of things, we're also the only combination fire department in the state. We're 20 career stations and 18 volunteer stations. And so when you look at like August 8th and the fires you saw in Lahaina, one of the things that is different on this island, when we talk about, hey, I just said we have less firefighters on the career side. Yeah. Does that mean we're at more risk? And I would say yes and no. Like definitely we could be better on the career side, but also side, we have an amazing volunteer corps, which could use some more money, hey James, to support them and everything else. But between our career side, our volunteer sides, and our amazing partners, so I call out Mike over there. He's a PTA fire, by the way. Also, the police are always out there making sure we're safe on the road by blocking off roads to stop people from trying to drive through heavy smoke. It's not a good idea in the middle of a fire because you're like, oh my God, there's a fire, and then you hit a fire truck. It doesn't work too well. We actually had that happen over here on Kauai High Road one day. So basically, when we look at like August 8th and the major fires we can have, we had like Mono Road 2001 and August 8th, obviously. These fires are going to continue. We're going to see these things in the future. The one thing that I do like about this island is we have really good partnerships in place. And while we have a long way to go, at least on the 911 response side of things, we have some amazing partners in PTA, the National Park Service, also responded to that fire, Department of Forestry and Wildlife from the state. So you look at like Lahaina. In Lahaina, responding to the Lahaina fire, they had 6 units that were there for fire suppression. Down in our region over here, when we had the Lalamilo farm lots, Kohala Ranch fire, and Mauna Kea fire, I had 58 units in this region to fight the fire. And that is not robbing my entire island. I have a stupid amount of vehicles just in my department. I have over 200 vehicles. Not all of them are fire suppression vehicles, mind you. There's helicopters, there's jet skis, there's UTVs, there's all kinds of stuff, right? But it's a ridiculous amount of apparatus to maintain. We have our own mechanics and everything else. Same day, we also had 3 fire starts down in Ka'u, which we were able to extinguish quickly so they didn't run away and become a problem. But that was a pretty hectic day. We evacuated 5 communities. The police did an amazing job of getting out there and helping our people get out of the communities. But it is a sign of things to come. So I would say, as much as everyone's like, oh, hey, the fire department did an amazing job or something like that. We only lost, kind of a large warehouse and a couple bridges and whatnot relative to Maui. I think it's good to acknowledge that the fire department has a long way to go and it could be a lot better. And at the same time, the solution to our current issues with fire and what's going on, fire department's only one part out of the 3 parts of that puzzle, right? One comes down to sort of the land management and how we're going to deal with these huge areas of grass that's just growing out and contributing to our fire issue. And the other is how do we deal with residential properties? Because historically the fire department has not come on to residential properties because it's 4th Amendment, right to do whatever you want with your house, my castle, my kingdom, whatnot. And the problem is your neighbor's castle and kingdom is a fire hazard. So like, what are we going to do about that, right? And so we're still trying to figure out some of the legal ramifications. But I think when we come and we sit in these groups and everything else, it's good to acknowledge that 2 parts of the solution are sitting right here. And, James might be like a part of the 3rd part in terms of the regulation side to deal with those landowners. But the residents matter. Because, the ability to go and inspect your own home, to do that home ignition zone training, to be ready to evacuate in an emergency, all of this stuff matters. It matters that your neighbors are taking care of their property. It matters that you are taking care of your property, and that we will become a more resilient or robust, community for that. Fire department, I'm here. I can answer any questions. Doing the best we possibly can to give you the most resilient, robust fire department possible. I would ask that you, on your side, understand that you have a kuleana responsibility to also take action on your side to make sure that your community, your neighbors, and your own house is also protected and you're educated in the process of doing the best job possible. So that's my thing.
I'm gonna ask you one question, if that's all right, to kind of get going here.
Yeah, sure.
You're a community member, Matt, for how many years now?
8.5 years is what we're.
And so what was the reason for you kind of getting into the role that you're in to kind of energizing community, to seeing the need there? What were your thoughts there behind, we have a family growing up here in the community. Why did you want to step forward and kind of engage the community, engage us and kind of bring us forward and have these conversations?
Sure, can I steal that microphone?
You got it.
Just so the recording, you can have it too, thank you. Yeah, no, it's two things. It's first, we evacuated. We were part of the 21 evacuation, along with most of you all in this room, I believe. We all left. It was scary, and we had a 1-year-old baby, and that's going to mess with your head a lot. And then Lahaina happened, and we saw the news, and we saw people burning to death in their cars. And when you experience a traffic jam because of a fire, and then you see other people actually suffer the consequences of that, it's just that's it. That's the entire reason why we're doing this and why we're here. And I just want to real quick thank everyone for being here. I'm so grateful that we have such a large crowd. I have no experience in this whole activism, doing things, connecting with the government world at all. There's two reasons why I get phone calls back from people like James and Chief Todd right here. It's because it's a real problem. We all know it's a real problem, and because we all care about it, because you all are here, right? This is not common in the other communities on the island. The thing that I want to thank everyone for doing here is supporting us and showing up here and submitting testimony when we're calling out for it. There will be opportunities again in the future. We have sent out many of them in the past. Please continue to participate and let your voices be known to the county, to the decision makers, because our voices are being heard. They're showing up, they're here right now, and there's lots of ideas and things going forward, and I think that change is on the very near horizon. So thank you, and this is all because you guys showed up and supported us. So that's what I gotta say. And I'm gonna pass it off, and then we're gonna invite people for questions?
I'm gonna ask Chief another question here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Chief, if you could just elaborate more on the partnerships that you have. So we have our police department here, we have our community partners. We also have our public works, members that are out there kind of for evacuation purposes to block roads. Can you speak more about that in a time of an emergency, how those kind of actions and that action list and kind of that those protocols that kind of undergo in those situations, and what steps are kind of taken across community, and what decisions are made in community, whether it's an evacuation, to what extent do you kind of undertake those calls?
So going back to 2001, Mono Road Fire, 2021, yeah. It's close. Mere 20 years difference, that's all. That one, we'd been monitoring the fire for a couple days. I think it was Friday night. The fire had started. It was over by Mono Road. One of my battalion chiefs had gotten a couple dozer lines around it. It had been knocked down. He was confident. I was very worried because the weather guys were talking about extreme winds, like 50 mile an hour plus the next day, and we're like, dude, you need to kill that thing. It needs to be dead. Or, my deputy got sent out there to check on it. I mean, it looked good, remote, a little bit inaccessible, hard to get water on it. So, they're doing the best they can. But following morning, it's coming over the hill to go up to North Kohala to do a blessing for a new big dog fire truck. We have a very wealthy man who lives down there who buys me fire trucks every now and then. And these things are amazing. They're designed to take water in off-road. Really awesome. They're tankers, but for off-road tanker stuff. So we're out there to bless it with the Sayre Foundation, and I'd stopped in at the incident command post because I'd heard, by early morning it had already jumped the line and was moving. So I was talking to my BC at the time who'd come on shift, and he was a little frazzled, and he said, man, this thing is running. So I'm like, well, I gotta get it to this blessing, keep it going. I'll be back in an hour or two and brief with you, and if you need any resources, let me know. So I went up to the thing, we blessed it, truck, Danny Cocker came up, and then I got a phone call, and I'm like, all right, well, now the truck is blessed, you get in the truck and go. You are being dispatched right now, and like everything is coming, right? Because at that point, we started losing 1,000+ acres an hour to fire, and it was running hard. So that had been that day. We fought it all day long. I shot back, stopped at the incident command post, which is by the cement area up on the upper road there, and then shot back to the EOC to monitor it all night. And then the following day, I was sitting there with Mitch. I'd been fire chief like 2 months at this point, or maybe even less. And we're talking about it, and we're like, man, it is, here's the outline, here's where it's coming. And we're like, all right, well, based on speed, travel, everything else, if it jumps the highway, that's our line. We got a call for the evac of the Waikoloa Village. And at 11:55, there's actually a video on the Station 9 Waimea. They have an Instagram. They got it on video, and unbelievable. We're talking basically a wall of fire, 50-foot flame front, cutting off of, making about 7 of my vehicles just disappear into just a wall of flames. And we ended up, one of our personnel being sent to the hospital because of smoke exposure and stuff like that, melted a bunch of our truck lights and stuff, but it was off to the races. So at noon, Mitch and I are in front of the television and we're calling for that evac. So how this generally speaking works is it could be that kind of a command decision where we're sitting in the EOC, we're measuring progress, we're looking at GIS and drone footage if we got it, or chopper routing, and then trying to determine rate of spread and when we got to evacuate. It can also be like August 8th, where at 4 a.m., one of the police officers out in the field says, we got to evacuate Kohala Ranch. That's it. So these are the either things. We can have someone in the field make the call. They just radio that in, and we go to work. Or it could be something where, within the EOC, we're just tracking the progress, and often that's if there's just this fire out in the middle of nowhere, and we're looking as that is moving along, and we have time to make those decisions. But at any given time, any single firefighter, well, generally we rank structure, so the captain's going to make the decision. The firefighter can be like, Cap, I think we should evacuate, but the cap will make that decision, and he'll get on the radio and say, hey, we need to evacuate. Or our police officer buddies over here will look at something, go, man, that is bad. We need to evacuate this community. So August 8th, Kohala Ranch was evacuated because police officers made that call at 4 a.m. And we're just like, we got to evacuate this location. And so EOC kicks into gear, messages start going out. I think there still could be improvement on that in terms of our messaging and the way our county emergency management gets those messages out, because part of the problem is were we even staffed up appropriately at 4 a.m. in the morning? Not always, right? We're like, they said the winds might kick up. When? Yeah, they don't really know. Sometime in the middle of the night, maybe. All right, are we gonna, everyone's just gonna camp out here and wait for the maybe? How's that gonna work, right? So not as, I think the county's red flag system is a little bit more robust. The national weather guys are saying, oh, hey, we got some potentially serious conditions. Fire department staffs up at 1.5% basically, I might hold back half a shift, stand up some of our extra brush trucks and tankers, and then the volunteers oftentimes get notified and they may stand up and just hang out at their vehicles. This also happens on New Year's, not because of wind, but because of alcohol and explosives that people like to combine. Like, it's a great idea, apparently. I might not be a big fan of that, just throwing it out there. New Year's is always the worst day to work in the fire department because of injuries and alcoholics. And horrible driving conditions with all the smoke in the road sometimes. So yeah, that's basically, we sit down, we look at what's going on, we make decisions, and then sometimes the decisions are made for us, and we react accordingly, and we start that evacuation process and do the best we can to communicate out through the various systems. And civil defense isn't here, but they manage our WIA, the wireless emergency alert system, which will ping your cell phone. They manage the television and radio broadcasts, and then they can turn the sirens on and everything else, and that's based out of our emergency operations center.
Mention the sirens.
Yeah, we do have some new sirens apparently. Some people pushed really, really hard. It wasn't me. I'm not taking any credit for this. I was like, yeah, someone should fix that, but it's not in my wheelhouse to tell other department heads how to do their job. But some guys maybe pushed real hard, and some sirens have been installed, and I think they're testing them.
They're gonna test them May 1st. That's the plan. So you have 2 new sirens here in the community at Kamakoa and Pu'unui. So they're gonna be testing them on Thursday. That's the plan. Yeah. So I do want to recognize there are community members here that have been pushing for a long time for that in this room. So thank you for your diligence on that and advocacy. Chief, I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm going to ask Matt one more, and then we'll kind of open up for a Q&A here. What is your relationship with water?
I mean, like sensual, or like where are we going with this? More is better. So let's talk a little bit about like LA and Lahaina. There's not a water system in the world built to deal with that kind of stuff. Understand that when we have a wind-driven fire front coming through a community or igniting a community, regardless of whether that started in a bush caused by an electrical line, or if someone's candle knocked over and took out the curtains and started their house on fire, or something else occurred that started it, once it starts, that is not something that is necessarily stoppable. The best way to put it is in the 1900s, we used to have urban conflagrations. And then we made building codes to say you can't build 2 wooden buildings right next to each other with 0 lot line, distance between each other and everything else. And so we started making buildings spaced apart, or we said, oh, you got to build out of concrete, or you have to have a partition wall that stops the fire from transitioning. And cities stopped burning down, and it worked. And this was great for like 100 years. And then within the last 10, 15, you start seeing California burning down. And they're like, it's a wildland problem. And yeah, it doesn't help that we're burning more and more forest, and whatnot. But when you look at Paradise, when you look at LA, when you look at Marshall Fire, when you look at Lahaina, these are urban conflagrations. This has nothing to do with, hey, we didn't do enough yard work or anything like that. At this point, you have embers falling from miles away all over everyone's house in the entire community. And having a nice fire road around the community is not going to stop it. A tree a mile away from any house can burn, send embers right into the middle of this community, and you can have someone's house light up, and it goes. Waikoloa is one of those communities that wind is a problem. It gets a little windy here. I had a fire. I had a fire in a regular house. As an investigator, I came out. Craziest thing, like 30 mile an hour winds, and so this guy comes out of his house, and he had like a detached garage. So he comes out the front door, and on the left there's an entrance into his garage, and he opens it and he sees flame. So he hits the button, runs around the garage to the front where on the other side he had his hose, and he's gonna put it out. And by the time the garage door opens, with the other door now open, he looks in there, and the 30 mile an hour wind came in and went, and everything's on fire. And his hose is now doing nothing. And it goes out the side door that he'd opened, it broke through his front plain glass window, and proceeded to wipe his living room. And so the reason this fire was interesting, right? So I get there, I'm doing the investigation, I walk in and I'm like, brand new house? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, man, there's nothing here. There's no flooring, there's no carpet, there's no cabinetry, there's this drywall. Weird looking drywall, it's got no paper on it. It has like little screws here and there. And then I'm looking, I'm like, man, those are some weird pieces of metal on it. Oh, those are springs, flattened springs from the couch. I'm like, that was where the couch was. And oh, that must have been the sink. It's a piece of flat metal with 2 holes in it, right? And there's nothing. The whole room is gutted. Like everything burned to ash, and ash was thrown out the back doors. And then I took one step off into the side into this guy's bedrooms. And it's like jarring because there's carpet, there's picture frames, and there's clothes in the closet, and there's no damage. But none of the windows were open, so the path of the airflow couldn't go into that area. And so everything in the path of the wind flow, gone, like it hadn't existed. Burned straight to ash, ash blown out the back. the craziest jagged patterns inside the green grass outside. Looked like a jack-o'-lantern teeth, you know, when I was trying to make my jack-o'-lanterns look cool. And just like, I'm like, man, that is probably one of the most surreal fires I've ever been into, where literally one half of the house has nothing because it literally burned to ash, and the other house perfectly preserved. But that is the area you live in, and that's the kind of fire, that 30 to 50 mile to 100 mile an hour wind that will come in and rip a community apart. Because these embers will come from miles away, they'll land on your home, they'll gather in a corner, and if you have not taken the time to take some of the training that they're offering, the home ignition zone and things like that, and looked at the things around your house, this is the kind of stuff that will start your house on fire. And it's compounded by the fact that we live in Hawaii. And have you guys got windows? Do they have screens on them? Are the screens metal or plastic? A lot of them plastic. All right, do you leave your windows open to allow airflow throughout the day so the house isn't hot? All right, if you leave your windows open and you left, and one of these fires started, those pieces of charcoal that are ignited, that are falling from the sky, will burn a hole right through that screen, and then they'll land on your couch, and then the inside of your house is on fire, and then your house is gone. And then all the embers from your house are going 2 miles down the road, landing on everyone else's house, and then the process repeats and repeats and repeats. So it's little things about how each of you is taking care of your house, and every house kind of matters, because all it takes is one house to burn, and it is sending unbelievable amounts of embers downwind to every other house. The house that I talk about where like half the house is gone, it was like the edge of the community. Really lucky, you know, because if it had been farther in the community, I kind of wonder if it would have taken out a couple homes on the way, you know, but it was the last house at the edge of the community, and like we're just like, wow, that is one of the craziest fire investigations I've done. But water is good. More water is better. Note, when we talk about like Mana Road, when we talk about August 8th, you know, whatever water we have in the water system, we're going to use. We're going to protect houses and everything else. We didn't lose any houses. But things like, you know, the big dip tanks where we get our chopper water and we drop it on top of houses, that requires the winds to be something where we can fly choppers. August 8th, I couldn't fly anything. I had to ground both of my helicopters. The bucket on the bottom where we hold the water acts like a big parachute in reverse and starts pulling my chopper off to the side. And we're on the radio, and by like 9 a.m. they're like, no, that's too dangerous, we're landing. So both of my choppers are landed. We have no air operations, you know. Mana Road, which was the 30 to 50 mile an hour, was comfortable enough that I had 4 choppers of mine working, and PTA gave me 4 Blackhawks and a Chinook, which I talk about Mike as an amazing guy, and PTA is amazing. From the fire perspective, I'm not here to talk about their military exploits and whatever else they're doing up there, but from the fire perspective, I love them. A Black Hawk helicopter costs them $5,000 an hour to fly. A Chinook costs them $30,000 an hour, and they dumped essentially $50,000 an hour of air assets for our fire for over a week to do that fire all day long. We're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. I spent $1.2 million in dozers and air assets myself in the 1 week. I'm pretty much sure that, you know, PTA mirrored that, if not more, on the air assets alone. So, you know, we burn money when we're out there fighting. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, but yeah, I love water. It's soothing. It's cool.
Thanks,
Way
Chief.
better to get covered in water than fire. Just throwing it out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. Matt, I just want to, before we kind of open up here a little bit, as I mentioned early on, you've been a strong advocate here in the community on all these issues. You've been interviewed on a lot of different media, kind of, you know, standing up on behalf of the community, listening to the community, being a part of the conversation, been interviewed left and right, pushing, you know, against kind of some of the status quo here and there, right? Mm-hmm. You've probably seen some change a little bit to some extent, and some recognition of the importance of these issues. What other challenges exist that you kind of see on the horizon? Like you've presented these cases to council, you have myself and Chief here kind of having these conversations, you hold these monthly meetings. What other challenges do you kind of see that we need to address kind of collectively for these conversations?
We need money.
we need money. We're asking for it. We're asking real clear for it, and hopefully that turns around and it works out. And
If only we knew a politician who
yeah,
had money.
exactly. But we're asking, and we know that we know that the process is going through, and hopefully, I can confidently say that I have seen a dramatic change in the tone and the interest and the knowledge from both politicians and government officials writ large in the last 6 months alone. So people are taking it seriously, they're listening, and hopefully that translates into action. But that's what we need. We need money. We need legislation. We also need legislation. I've both been happy with what's happening at the state and a little disappointed. I think the fire marshal bill will likely pass. I know we can ask the people here if that is likely or not. Seems like it is. But HB 113 looks like it was shelved for the year, and that had a lot of vegetation requirements in it. So, you know, I do wish there was a little bit more action at the state level. And with the codes, like Chief was just mentioning, different rules to protect large swaths of the community. So, and we're working on it. We're seeing what happens. We're talking to you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, before we kind of open up to questions here a little bit, just wanted to touch on a couple things. You know, as we mentioned, as you kind of heard, there is this importance of partnership. You know, whether it's within governance and our administrative departments, our police, our community members, our fire department, and public works. It is amazing. Sometimes we don't know who's actually out there in the field, kind of helping to guide some of the residents during these evacuation events. Clearing roads, all these different sort of pieces, and community members that are out there on some of the dozers and the D9s that are carving some of these fuel breaks from time to time. So there really is that partnership, and I do want to recognize the WVA as well. I know that you've had some really strong conversations, and I've been a part of them. Thank you for having me in one of your more recent board meetings about, you know, wildfire mitigation. I want to recognize the efforts that you are trying to make as community, and you are hearing from your residents, and you're trying to make these efforts and pushing forward on more stronger, you know, mitigation efforts, whether that's, you know, more active grazing in some of these unmanaged agricultural lands. And there's more of that to be done and seen across the leeward side of the island for sure. And so that is going to take legislation for sure to kind of really encourage proper use of these spaces that we're not really seeing in some of these areas. And some people are taking those tax breaks, so we're going to have, you know, serious conversations about what that means in protecting the community at large. You know, WVA, you've also been working on maintaining the fuel break roads and your partnership with DOT. So those are kind of those important pieces. And I mention all these things because these are all these tools in the tool belt. And we really have to use a lot of them and all of them if we can, because we're really not going to share what's going to come our way. These could be these really extreme events that could change things quite rapidly. We also have our partnership with, you know, community organizations like Team Rubicon, that are actively out there in the community, you know, maintaining these spaces. They're going to be out there this weekend, so I want to mahalo them for their, you know, their dogged efforts, being in the community and kind of managing these spaces. And, you know, Chief Todd, you know, I want to thank you for your recent efforts. We've been in partnership with HWMO, and then from my side, and when HWMO reached out to me, to reach out to Department of Environmental Management. So those are our waste facilities. The conversation was about green waste. And so this month, for the month of May, there will be an opportunity to, as Firewise communities, there's an opportunity for extended use of the green waste facilities in the district. So it'd be good to connect with your Firewise. 2 months. Thank you, Dan, I appreciate that. Yeah, my understanding was just the first month for May, but it's good to hear that's going for 2 months. And so being a part of a Firewise community has this opportunity to you to take your personal vehicles to these green waste facilities on an extended basis, so you're not really limited in that capacity. So engage with your Firewise community leaders to access those placards that you're going to need to get into those areas and kind of continue that use across these months. And it is that labor. I recognize there's that labor piece that you're going to have to be working out there, working with your neighbors to really manage some of these spaces here. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I think Chief Todd, we've kind of talked about this idea, we've talked about it here in the community, and the community is thinking about these controlled burn opportunities. So these are these other tools that we're thinking about and considering. We really have to invest the time and energy and resources to understand what those impacts are going to be on community and make sure that we're doing we have the perfect situation, that we have the resources on hand. So those are something that I think HFD is exploring. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit more at all right now.
We're exploring that. So I did reach out, and we're looking at any way to reduce fuel. Some of that is working with the community and green waste and HWMO, and some of it is maybe working on getting guys to come in and bring in goats or things like that. But one of the things we were exploring recently was maybe to go more like the other 48 states and do some controlled burns and whatnot. And we'd been looking at this region, so we started conversations, and it is open. It does require a little bit more on our part. You got to survey the area, make sure you're not burning down native palila bird habitats or some kind of ethnic heritage site or something. Sure. So for that reason, I don't know that it'll happen this year, but it is one of those things we are exploring. Before we get to the point where we do it, there'd be a lot of community meetings to talk about, hey, maybe on a random evening when the weather is really good, you might smell some smoke and see some fire, but feel free to come out and watch or something like that. But also have the opportunity for the community to weigh in and say yay, nay, that kind of stuff. It's not something we just suddenly on a random Tuesday you're like, what's going on? There's a fire. I've got it ready, set, go get myself out of here. You would have gotten a lot of messaging. We put up some boards and start with community meetings. But we're going to start the process of looking into it and start doing the research and whatnot, some training and if things look well and it's a possibility, one of the things we'd looked at is possibly of trying to get a little bit of the area around Waikoloa maybe burned back and whatnot to create a better break just in case we do have a wildland fire coming up and encroaching on the village. So it is one of those things we're exploring right now. I hope to have more information on that by next year, or maybe just not going to happen answer, but one way or another it is one of the things we're exploring.
Thanks, Chief. The last piece I kind of want to touch on for open up in Q&A is the legislation piece. And right now we're in the county budget process. The mayor released his first draft a little over a month ago now, the budget, and we actually got to sit down as council members and talk and ask questions from each of the 20 plus departments that represent the county at different lengths. And a lot of that circled around the operating budget and what pays our wages and salaries for our county employees and our facilities, maintenance of our facilities. The other piece of that is that capital budget project. That other half of the budget is the capital improvement projects. And some good conversations there. And I was grateful for you as community members to come and testify in front of council on what was missing from the CIP list. And I've had the conversations with Matt and the wildfire safety advocates. I've sat down with members of the mayor's team, with the public works administrators to really talk about those infrastructure pieces that are missing here in the community. So I do recognize that struggle that you've had for a long time here in the Waikoloa community, and we'll be pushing for changes in the CIP list to make that a reality. I mean, it's nothing that is sold and it's like done, but it's one step in the direction that I think has been missing for this community for a long time. So I really encourage your support and bringing those sort of amendments and changes to the capital improvement project list. That's really important for this community. Because as I stated earlier, yes, there are the private landowners and they have their responsibilities and they have their agreements. But as the county develops and grows in this space, in and out throughout your community, adding affordable housing, adding other capacity in this area, we have a responsibility to kind of meet those infrastructure needs and demands of the community. And those have been neglected for far too long. So I kind of want to take a step forward and kind of start making some of those changes there in the CIP list, and really going to need your support kind of moving those things forward. So, with that, I really appreciate you being here, kind of listening to this kind of casual conversation. These two individuals are very bright individuals. I didn't queue them up with any questions. I could ask them on the fly. They're pulling from their gut, their experience, their thoughts, and their wisdom, and really the practice that they put into play with their colleagues, with their community members, about answering these questions. And I'm sure you might have some harder questions for them too. So I'm going to kind of open it up to the floor here if you'd like to join in some of this conversation and hear from Chief Todd and kind of his wisdom and his experience in the field. And then Matt can also chime in with his experience here in the community and kind of driving things forward.
You all hear from me enough. Ask questions if you want, but you don't need to ask me questions.
Anyone got a question? Please come up to the microphone here if you don't mind. Awesome. Thank you so much.
My name is Frank Even. I'm running for WMA board too, if anybody's interested in people who care about this issue getting on the board. Just figured I'd mention that. Not the only person in this room that applies to as well. So I did not, we had, this weekend, we suddenly smelled something burning. And in this village, you smell something, smoke, something burning. Definitely suddenly like, what's going on? Where is it? I'm checking the Watch Duty app, looking for, see where there's fires. I don't see anything. We see across the ravine from our house, a flicker. There's a fire on a personal property. So I guess, long story short, I'm trying to get to, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole to see what all of our county regulations are or not. But I figure if there's any good place for this question to be asked, where we could maybe get a quick education, what are the county ordinances and or state ordinances about what you can burn on your personal property and what can be done about it if we're concerned about people burning on their property?
Can you repeat it really quickly just for this microphone?
So question is what can you burn on your property and what you cannot burn on your property, essentially. You can burn nothing on your property for the most part. There are exceptions to that. So under Hawaii administrative rules for the Department of Health, under, I'm going to butcher this, but I think it might have been 60.1. There are like 8 exceptions to what can be burned. So there are things like agricultural burns. We have farming that happens and it gets infested with like beetle borer, for example, and it's just not feasible to go and like poison entire orchards. And so what they do is they, they'll limb trees or things like that, and all the limbs that are expected to be infected get brought to a central site. They apply for a permit with the Department of Health. That permit is heavily regulated. They can only burn on certain days. They have to have a water source. They have a site that the fire department comes and inspects. So there is the agricultural burning. There are exemptions in there for like mass casualty body burning. Like a plague hits all the cows on the island and we need to burn them. There's exemptions for cooking fires. So if you had an emu, smoked meat, things like that, indigenous way of cooking that's normal to you, that is one of those things that might be an exception. And as a firefighter, you would get that because like guys would be burning trash in their yard and you get there, they hold one hot dog. No, it's a cooking fire. It's not a cooking fire, dude. Like you need to put that out.
So no big campfires.
So technically,
In the village.
there's not supposed to be bonfires. There's not supposed to be campfires. There could be exceptions, like let's say they have one of those little tables that has like the butane or whatever, and it makes like flames or everything, and it's not a fire hazard. It's designed for that purpose. But if they just stack a bunch of wood in their backyard and put some stones around it and light it on fire, technically no, that is not allowed under the code for any reason whatsoever. Now, if they put a hot dog over it, it gets a little funky because now they're doing a cooking fire, and that's sometimes the excuse you get. The moment they start throwing some plastic bags in there or taking the leaves in their yard and throwing them into there too, we're like, nah, dude, that wasn't a cooking fire. You're just trying to burn your green waste or whatever, right? So it's a fine line there because we do emus here, right? It's like a big thing, right? We're gonna have a baby luau, like we gotta dig a hole and we gotta heat up some rocks and we gotta make some laulau, you know what I mean? Like this has gotta happen. On the other side of things, we need to do it safely. So also, like if my neighbor wants to make smoked meat, as long as he brings me a bag after filling my house full of smoke, we're good, Like I will forgive him for filling my house with a smoke if there's a bag of smoked meat involved in it. Yeah, but it's relative, right? So as far as it goes though, if you just see guys burning wood in their yard, no, not allowed. See them burning leaves, if you see them burning trash, which is more maybe the opposite side of the island, directly opposite of here, but it does happen. Those are also a no. And then if you're looking for more information and you want to hit me up later on, I can go find you the actual exemptions on when you can or cannot burn. There's a few random other things like burning of the letters, pyrotechnic events and things like that. Most of that runs through the fire department, which we do allow under very strict controlled conditions, and we have an ability to cancel at any time. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, no burning is basically the answer. If you see your neighbor out there with one of those propane torches, not allowed. Haven't told people you can't sell them, but you know, can't use them technically. Yeah, unless it's with a hot dog.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I was gonna say, like, I felt like she set you up, you know, like you got there and like you're like,
I'll take it out,
yeah, there we go.
My name is Paul Dahlquist. I've been a resident of this village for 27 years, and during that time I've been evacuated twice. The first time, and I don't remember exactly what year it was, I should have looked it up.
So 2005.
Whatever. But it happens that I was a longtime friend of the fire captain who was in charge of ground operations here at the village. And he tells me that we really came unbelievably close to losing the entire village. He had to call the mayor, was Harry Kim, I believe at the time, and ask him for a bulldozer to build a fire break. And I don't know how many times, but several times, the mayor said, no, it's too expensive, we don't have the money for that. And I guess finally, my friend finally convinced Harry that without that bulldozer, we would lose the village, and he finally gave in. Felix said if it had been a half an hour later, 15 minutes later, the village would have been lost. My question is, are we still in that kind of position where we might need extraordinary means, technology, or whatever to fight the fire, that we're going to have to really, can we get that kind of stuff? To me, cost of a bulldozer was a lot less than the cost of 2,000 homes or however many it is.
So Mana Road is, I guess, a good example of that one. I paid for 29 dozers, 2 helicopters, and some were given to me for free. It cost me $1.2 million. So there was like advertisements in the newspaper, or not advertisements, there's articles in the newspaper talking about how the federal money was gonna come in, and people are like, you know, calling up like, how do I get some of that to replace my fence or my line or my Driscoll? And we're like, no, the federal money was an FMAG, it was a federally declared, you know, fire management area grant. And what it was is it paid back 75% of what it cost me after years of paperwork. But I was still out $1.2 million. My annual budget for dozers is $30,000. I can tell you 2 months after that, I was having a hard time paying the electric bills on the fire stations to keep the lights on, and scrambling, trying to figure out how we're gonna make this work. I still don't have a budget to like pay for those dozers. I just say send it, and we figure it out later on. There's technically this, you know, emergency slush fund of cash, which every year they wait until the very end of the year to go, I guess we'll give you back the money you spent on, you know, trying to prevent major disasters that wipe out entire communities. But that's the county's, you know, financial system. They want to see if I can absorb it so they don't have to give me the money or whatever, right? They don't want it to be like a free ride where they're just like, yeah, you want dozers? Have dozers. There's a car for you, there's a car for you. No, it doesn't work that way, right? The county's always gonna be sort of stingy on that kind of stuff. But as a fire chief, basically I eat it, right? Like if I need a dozer, we don't say no. Get the dozer out there, right? I think we do a good job. We'll figure it out afterwards. But if there's a resource out there and I can get it, I have not ordered air tankers yet. Those are those big planes that drop a huge amount of red liquid. They're 70 grand an hour.
Like $20 million up front, right?
Well, yeah, like if you want to even just get it here, like it's already before just the flying to get here. I'm out like a mill, and then it starts working, and then I have no fire department 2 months later because we're out of money. All the firemen go home, there's no jobs, you know, we'll see you next year. So like, I haven't ordered one of those. We're not like California where the government at the state level just comes in and goes, yeah, here's your check for $40 billion, you know, or whatever, right? So should be noted, like, you know, California has a vastly different system. They hit the gigafires over there where they're, you know, they're spending $1 billion plus per fire, no problem. I mean, not no problem, but like, I mean, like they have that kind of expenditures on fires where they're spending that kind of money. Hawaii is not ever going to get close to that, I don't think. Luckily, we have this thing. It's like this blue sensual thing that's at the edge of the island that stops the fire from transitioning from island to island. I think they call it water or something like that. But yeah, so you know, we do eventually run into a wall of water that stops fire from transitioning. So it does sort of contain itself at some point. It's horrible.
You know, you're hearing these numbers from Chief Todd, and you know, as we have the conversation in the community with HWMO and other community partners, and Chief can probably attest to this as well. It's that preventative side and that mitigation side that's going to save us some of these bigger dollars at the tail end. So it's really these personal responsibilities, the personal ownership that we have of our own space, of our own community, and then how we actively manage the lands around us. So whether we're talking about that interface between those brushlands and our communities, you know, we have to be better stewards of those areas. We have to work with those landowners to make sure that we're engaging with them, that they know that this is an emergency for our community, right? That we need to actively use those agricultural spaces if that's really going to be the way to minimize that space. Otherwise, we could just pave it all over, right? But you don't want to see that, right? So we want these natural spaces, but they have to be actively managed. And that really has to be the conversation that we have at community and engaging with the large landowners that really surround our community. And really want to thank, you know, the community here that's actively participating in those conversations to see that end, to really understand that those preventative costs are going to save us in the long run. So whatever little changes you can make around your home and your home spaces for defensible spaces, what you can do in the community, in your community gardens, you know, these things that we kind of understand the impacts in our communities here, especially in Waikoloa, where we live in a very arid, windy community. So we have to have a kind of a better understanding of that space. Chief?
Yeah, in that vein, you know, and jokes aside and all that, but when we talk about that preventative, every dollar you spend here saves potentially thousands of dollars. How many of you guys have an insurance policy for your house? How many of you that got the insurance policy have updated the value of your house with your insurance policy as the property values have raised? Because one of the biggest issues that happened with Maui is people basically, they got an insurance policy and then they realize when they go to cash in and they bought their house for $300, they got their insurance policy for $300, their house is now worth $700, rebuilding would cost them $700, but their insurance policy was only for $3. So the amount of money they could even get from their insurance isn't going to cover the rebuild cost. So they're out $400 grand. The amount of money you spent to just keep your house from burning is probably the best investment. But I would not stop with it just burning. I'd say like hurricane strapping, you know, Simpson strong ties, some other things like that. It never hurts to take a couple of little safety measures here and there, but you know, what are they going to say? An ounce of prevention for a pound of cure. You know, there's always the upfront costs are better. So, I think next question.
Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, please.
I just want to clarify on the who's in charge of the fuel breaks, because I know Waikoloa Drive Forest does some herbicide treatment, and if you guys can just talk about that a little bit. I know Chief Mike and I
Speak that a little bit, the ownership of the fuel
drivers
breaks.
I mean, I can say what I know.
I don't have all the details and the information on kind of the ownership. I know that the WVA, you know, a couple of those fuel breaks are cut through WVA parcels. So the WVA has been doing some mitigation and spraying efforts and herbicides in those spaces. Matt, do you want to add a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so the state expanded and cut them, and they did commit to providing some amount of funds to maintain them for at least 1 year. I don't know if it was for multiple years. I don't know where that came from. But they did say that they're going to pay to clear them out this year, but ultimately it's going to probably land on whoever the actual landowner is of the thing that it is on. So if the fuel break crosses state land, they're going to be responsible at the state point. A lot of them, we've got about 10 miles or so on our land. We are responsible for those 10 miles. But as I said, right now, the state has provided money to maintain them for now. So you might have something to add. You might wear.
So besides just the maintenance of those brakes, those brakes work in great for normal fire, right? Like there is a fire, it's moving, all right, it's great. They are not effective at all when we start talking about the Mono Road, August 8th type fires. When we evacuated Waikoloa in 2021, the flame front was a 50-foot flame front. It crossed the highway like that. And the highway is way bigger and paved. And it was not an obstacle whatsoever to the fire. We could have a 300-foot break of just straight concrete, and there's a really good chance when we start hitting that 50-mile-an-hour wind plus zone, that's not going to stop it. So it is good to have fire breaks. Does not hurt to have fire breaks. But it may not help depending on the incoming conditions and things like that. So it is not the end-all be-all. I just want to emphasize, the home ignition zone, the treatments for your own house matter more in some respects than the fire breaks do.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chief. Yes, please.
Waikoloa Village. First, I want to thank you, James, for bringing the chief here. It's a very special opportunity for us. I appreciate you being here.
I drove myself, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're able to do that.
After a long day, too. Yeah.
What we've been looking at here in the village is a couple of proceedings at the PUC that have arisen from the PUC's directive to all the utilities in the state to come up with fire mitigation plans. And the ones of concern are the HECO plan that James mentioned earlier, and also a plan that's been put together by the West Hawaii Water Service for their service. And of course, the water service is critical to making water available to fight a fire here in the village. And that's really the only source you have to tap into. And from the water service standpoint, what they've told us is that their regular well production would drop from 6 wells to 2 wells if they lose power.
Jeff's back there. The right answer, the person who's in charge of it can answer. He's here.
Well, we can supplement.
Yes.
But the question is, in the event power is lost, which is a risk because of the power line that runs right next to the village, so this 69,000-volt line that, if it comes down, could ignite a fire right next to the village and start an ignition right there. But it also helps provide power to run the pumps for the water service. So the question is, first of all, is the fire department going to weigh in with the PUC on these proceedings to advise as to which ones you think are most important? And then secondly, from our perspective, from a community perspective, what would you recommend in terms of either trying to underground the lines to make sure that they continue to provide service during a fire rather than being lost in a fire situation, so that the water service can continue to pump normally because they would have the water source? Or in the alternative, as a backup, having the water service install storage at the top, up at the wells, say 1 million gallons, to make sure that you can continue to fight a fire for 24 or 48 hours after the fire, after the power is lost.
I like all of those answers. Let's make them give like 1 million gallons and some backup gen. Did you want to come up and?
Jeff coming.
Why don't I let Jeff weigh in here, and then I'll answer from the fire department's perspective.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to say, unfortunately, I do agree with you. I appreciate your candid comments. I have the pleasure of managing this water system. One on Maui, we border behind it to the north, so unfortunately, lot of knowledge there. But yeah, when these fires come into communities, there's no water system out there that's designed for a wildland fire coming to a town. The pipeline sizes, the storage, you can build pump stations. Maui County could have had, well, I just met with the director, he told me they could have had 60 million gallons of water. They would have never fought that fire. You just can't fight that kind of fire. But that doesn't mean that we don't take measures to provide fire protection in a normal fire situation. You said we had 2 wells, well, so we actually have 8. So all 8 wells, anyone call me anytime, I'll take you there to see them if you want to see them. They're 8 and they're all up above the fire road, right? I call it Goat Central. There's literally, it's like going on safari, there's like 10,000 goats up there. But they keep, I mean, honestly, around our well sites is where they live, because our wells kick out a little bit of water. They love that, but they keep, but the footage, I mean, we have like the best wildland fire defensible space around our well sites because of those dang goats. And we have generators, so 8 wells, and 4 of them, so half of them have generators, right? And then I was at Matt's last meeting, or meeting a while ago, and the community was like, why don't you have generators on all of your wells, right? And so the generators are exactly the size of this red screen here. They're the size, they're in a 40-foot container. They're massive. They're massive generators. They're megawatt generators because our wells here, look where they are. They have to get into that water line. They're 1,300 feet deep. So they're 500 horsepower motors, and so you need a generator that big to run one well. And so we're looking at getting a 5th generator. But by last time I was at this mine, I was shaking, I think, because I was here for the water rate increase. I mean, we're facing this massive rate increase because we haven't raised rates in 6 years, and then I want to add another $1 million generator in there because they're about $1 million. So, but we do have that in our capital infrastructure plan to put a 5th generator up there. Numbers-wise, we got about 5 million gallons above the village, and then 6, and you see them on the road, I forget the day, probably on Waikoloa Road, about 6 million gallons in the nice reddish colored tanks down there on the side of the road. So we got roughly.
But how long can you run the generators if you can't get more fuel into the site?
Yeah, great question, because this happened in Lahaina. So what happened in Lahaina, that system burnt down, and then HECO cut our water power, cut electricity for 20 days on our system in Maui. So we went without power for 20 days. But that means really all of my operators, all our employees, we were just trucking fuel, right? At that point, it takes an ohana. Everybody comes together. The police, the fire. Goodwill Brothers was like just pushing the roads open to get diesel trucks in because people get their stuff together in those situations. And so, yeah, we trucked fuel for 20 days. So I don't ever want to have to do 20 days of trucking diesel fuel. But off the bat, we can run for a few days, but then we got to have diesel fuel.
Yeah, and so that's the worst case scenario. But what happens when you run out of fuel and you can't get more in? Anyway,
I mean, at that point, the fire, I guarantee you, I've got a couple days of water, and then I'm going to get fuel there. So
like when it really depends on the scope and the level of the fire. When we talk about Lahaina, the fire started in the early morning. They had it out by noon, 3 a.m. or 3 in the afternoon. It had rekindled by midnight. Most of Lahaina's gone. So in 9 hours, the majority of the village is already burned down. The concept of multi-day operations or things like that. The biggest issue in Lahaina when we start talking about that particular fire is that once the first house started burning, it was too late. When it's been driven by a wind at 80 miles an hour, which is what we were seeing in Lahaina, like they needed to stop that when the grass started smoldering again. Really, the first house that's fully on fire is going to send embers for miles. They had houses down in the village that were missing their roofs because the 80-mile-an-hour things had just ripped the roofs off of these buildings. We didn't need the brush to start on fire because when you take a roof off and it runs right through the middle of Lahaina, it started breaking electrical lines. They could have had the fire start down there, and it would have been a similar issue, except everything downwind from that particular parcel. There's a point at which it is beyond the fire department's ability to slow or stop the fire, especially if we start looking at the 50-mile-an-hour plus wind areas. Now, understand there's levels, right? So when we talk about HECO's PSPS, you know, these are conversations we've had with them. I don't think there's great answers is the problem. You know, when we look at like the Paradise fire, 19,000 homes burn in a day in Paradise, 88 people are dead. It was a 50-cent clip that broke. Basically, up on the mountain, there's a 50-cent clip holding a high tension, high power line. It snaps after being up there for 30, 40 years, right? And the line comes down, starts a fire, 19,000 homes burn in a day. The dynamic of our world has changed. You know, like I said, 100 years ago, we had conflagrations, urban conflagrations, where we were burning down cities, and then we built building codes and we changed things. But we are on the back end of that at this point. We have not, our building codes are not built around the concept of an 80-mile-an-hour driven fire front coming through a city. And so we're a little bit on behind of that. The water systems aren't built for that and everything else. In the short term, HECO has come up with their PSPS. I think in general, if they put out the power and the fire doesn't start, it's a good thing, right? If the fire starts, at that point, we got to make some decisions. And they do stand up in incident command team to monitor at that point. And so conversations are happening with our water companies, our units on the scene, our units basically that are pumping water, and we'd be making those kind of communications go on, like how much water you guys have, and tracking that as the fire is progressing. So it really depends on what's going on, and there's a variety of possibilities, but mostly it's when this stuff goes down, we're representatives and guys are tying into our EOC, and everyone that has a place at the table, it doesn't matter if they're part of Hawaiian Electric or if they're part of the county water system or a private water system, everyone's got representatives and they're all talking like, hey, this is our current status, this is what's going on, and I think that's one of the nice things about this island. I can tell you, I spent some time in Maui after the fire, and man, like, it was a different island. That's all I can say, man. Like I talk about our great relationships with like Mike Deal, who was PTA Fire and DOFA and stuff like that. But I think it's just different. Like the people here are like, hey, we're on an island, we're stuck together, we got to make it work. I don't really like you, but you know, like it's gonna happen, right? And everyone shows up in the room, and it's really weird because I sit in these meetings in our EOC at Civil Defense, and like our rooms are packed. Maybe it's because we have the lava flow and we've had just disaster after disaster, and so we're just used to it. But there's like 50, 60 people from various, you know, areas where it's impacted, and we're all sitting there waiting for whatever's going to happen and figuring it out and making decisions and moving resources and everything else. And I look at the Zoom because they have the whole state on these Zooms, right? And Talmadge, you know, I'll tell you this, but he never turns on our camera. So no one can see us, right? It's just this black screen with the name Talmadge. And he's like, yeah, everything's fine, right? But then no one knows we're there. But when I'm looking at the other islands, there's no one inside their EOCs. There's like 6 people. And I'm like, where is everyone else in the state? And I'm like, Talmadge, you gotta turn on your camera, man. Like, we need to shame everyone else into doing a better job or something. Like, I don't see the fire department there, the police officers in there. But like on our island, dude, police is present. Their command staff is there. Fire's command staff, PTA's command staff, everyone from water, HECO, you know, like the entire room is too warm because their air conditioning's not keeping up. But like, we're ready. And I think Hawaii does a really good job. I think there's a lot of areas we can still improve upon, but you know, when it comes to these kind of issues and everything else, while I don't think that we have the greatest infrastructure in place, I don't think anyone does really. We didn't build these water systems, we didn't build these electrical systems under this premise of like, hey, we're gonna be running into 80-mile-an-hour winds. Are you ready for that? No, we don't, right? So it is what it is. But anyway, I think we have more questions, so.
Just to clarify, are you saying that the best protection that Lahaina could have had was better vegetation management?
No, my honest opinion on Lahaina was house to house needed to address their particular home. That would have been probably the best thing they could have done. But part of the problem was Lahaina was a village that was built in the early 1900s. When we were burning down Chicago, we were building some of those houses that were in Lahaina at the same time. And so they were grandfathered to some extent on some really old codes. We're talking single wall, redwood, 5 feet away from their neighbor's house, which was single wall and redwood, and a bunch of alterations that were never approved. We have a few places on this island. Waikoloa is not one of them, but we have a few places on this island that are of similar worrying construction types. Honestly, downtown Kailua, Kona, Hilo, and Honoka'a have some very, very tight-knit, very old buildings where there's a bunch of termites and they're like, hold the building together, you know, I can tell you, as a fire department, we've fought fires in downtown Hilo. We don't win. I lose buildings. I just try not to lose the building next to the building. And we work real hard, but my favorite place, Paramount Grill, that had amazing fried rice, we didn't save that building. A couple others down, and now if you go to Hilo because it's tsunami, it's so hard to rebuild. You just end up with these empty lots every now and then where they turn it into parking or whatever, because rebuilding in downtown Hilo with all the extra rules just is nearly impossible. But fire department is not going to save those buildings, man. I'm going to be honest with you. Our goal is to save the neighboring building, and it is what it is.
Evacuation has to be our first priority.
Well, I would say two things. One, prepping your personal house, getting your neighbors to prep their houses, and it's things like the venting, understanding your home ignition zones, and everything else. And then, yes, the Ready, Set, Go program, being ready and set to be able to go.
Thanks, Chief. I know I'm watching the time here, and I want to take just a couple of questions. So Dan, please, yeah.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, Chief Todd, and everybody for being here. We talk a lot about fire, but that's only one of the risks to our community. Hurricane, tsunami, and so I wanted to kind of get your recommendation, Chief Todd, to our community on how to be prepared when the ports, get destroyed or the fuel tanks go to waste and we have no energy. And then, James, what are we doing to create like a resilience hub here in Waikoloa and other communities across the island to be able to care for ourselves for 7, 10, 3 weeks? That's my question.
Thank you, Dan.
So fascinatingly enough, very good question, Dan, by the way. I'll be running a drill with some of my chief officers, our next continuing operation plan about tsunami stuff. I think honestly one of the things we're most vulnerable to that worries me, but it could be 10 years, it could be 100 years before the next major tsunami. Most of our energy sufficiency on this island, well, actually, technically, right now, 59% of our energy is produced by renewables.
Yeah, the
so
solar.
not a bad. Two solar fields, one PGV that's producing about 34 megawatts right now, and we got a little bit of tiny little bit of hydro, but only about 59%. The other 41% of our energy comes out of petroleum products. Those petroleum products come in at the docks, and they're stored at the docks. So 10 million gallons in Hilo and about 1.5 million, I think, in Kona, in Kauai High. But one good tsunami, and we would have zero ability to store anything that we did not already have on the island, and the ability to ship in would be limited until we could rebuild. And then rebuilding would mean the hazmat cleanup and a variety of other things. So I think one of the bigger issues when we start talking about survival and resiliency and being robust is that we should be ready for the potential that if we had a major tsunami, I'm pretty sure if the tsunami got up to Waikoloa, you don't need a plan. None of us are going to make it. But if it just took out the docks or things like that, how much food do you guys have stored up? And then what is your plan if there's no power? Because what would probably happen is we'd have to drop down to rolling blackouts. I'd assume a bunch of tourists would be like, oh, I got to get out of here. So maybe the hotels wouldn't need power and we'd be able to save a little bit there. But I assume at least a quarter of the island at any given time would be out of power because we just wouldn't have the energy for it. So if you didn't have power, how are you going to store food? How are you going to survive? Until I think at that point a nuclear sub parks itself off of Kauai High and starts funneling power into our grid or something along those lines, which is possible. But long term, we are a little bit energy tight right now. I was thinking about this. I'm like, man, what we need was quarter. We just need about 60 megawatts of hydro, 60 of geothermal, 60 of solar. And then the other 60 can be petroleum because, like that way we're not relying on any one stream. And actually, we're actually probably better for diversifying.
Yeah.
But, go talk with your PUC guys about that. I don't know, maybe. Have a food source, be prepared. Think about more than just, other things. They sell these 5-gallon things of food. All you need is water. I have one in my house. That's my backup plan, right? And these are the kind of things I think about because they technically pay me to do that. So I think it's worthwhile for you as well.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks for the question, Dan. I know I'm just keeping on the time here, and I know people have some questions and want to mingle here a little bit. What I've seen in our resilience hubs across the region here have been very different from each other. And I think you have here in Waikoloa a lot of different semblances of a resilience hub in different capacity and different form. Chief spoke about the energy side, the food side. Those are definitely those key pieces of kind of sustaining community during these disaster events. I mean, we look at Waimea as an interesting example of their priority has been about communication and assisting and supporting communication across the community during emergency events. North Kohala has taken a different approach about being a kind of a community hub of all these different resources and kind of providing a one-stop shop for a lot of different supplies or information. So I really see here in Waikoloa an opportunity to really grow that resilience hub. And there has been some effort already in the past, and I think more support is needed to kind of stand up a resilience hub. And there are community partners that are looking at storing assets for emergency purposes to have on hand in disaster events. That food piece is an interesting one, I think, here for Waikoloa Village. That we look at an exemplar in the community of Ann Worden, for example, with their community markets and trying to have food hubs here in the community as really that key piece of kind of standing up community as well. So I really see it here, Dan. I think we just kind of have to pull the pieces together, and I'm happy to work with the community partners here to kind of bring those together and have those conversations. So appreciate the question, Dan. Shelley, please.
Yes, Team Rubicon is a humanitarian and a disaster response organization. A lot of volunteers do this work. We've been having a lot of conversations about a post-FEMA world. As things are getting a little crazy, is the county and the state talking about what happens if the feds don't come through? Do we have the resources to be able to respond to disasters?
It's a good question, Shelley. It's actually something I've been thinking about with the challenges at the federal level, the national level, what's happening there on the continent, and how we need to be more self-reliant. And this does speak to Dan's question as well about having resilience hubs, but we also need that capacity here to be able to give grants to community for mitigation efforts, or be able to work with our state partners on state insurance. Like there are these other pieces that we cannot always be reliant on the continent. Like things could change internationally, globally, that we really have to be a little bit more self-reliant on our resources here within community. And some of this is going to take legislation. It's something that I've been thinking about having some funds for mitigation purposes that a community could apply for grant for the purposes of preventative efforts. So this is something that I am toying with.
Just so you know, we're also helping the continent because we're on the East Coast,
Yep.
we're in LA, we're all over the place.
Absolutely.
Responding to the disasters on the continent.
Yes, you are. Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate your work in the community. Yeah, Dana, your last one. Yeah, here we go.
Just a couple of things to follow up on.
Please. You have probably more correct information on some of these.
Well, I just wanted to say in terms of the Red Set Go webinar that you mentioned.
Yep.
That's happening on May 6th. If anyone wants to register for the event, you can visit the HWMO website. So it's hwmo.org. And after that, /ready-set-go. And you can register there. And then I just wanted to, I think it was mentioned briefly that May is the Community Wildfire Preparedness Month. And just wanted to let everyone know there's lots of firewise communities all over the state rallying around mitigation projects ahead of the fire season, and including ours. And so mahalo to everyone who's doing that. And then sort of in fine with that. Mahalo Chief Todd for extending the green waste drop-offs at the transfer stations. And if anyone wants a pass for that in the Waikoloa area, you can make sure you take one of my business cards, and email me, and then I can get you a pass for a permit. And then Chief Todd, Nani wanted to know, Nani is our co-executive director, you know that, but for everyone else here, of HWMO, Wildfire, can you make a proclamation like was done the previous year about May being Community Wildfire Preparedness Month?
I know a county council member. I'm pretty sure we can work that out. I think it is viable. Yeah, we'll get one of those going.
Thank you, Dana. I really appreciate you all being here this evening. We're going to wrap it up here. I just want to give our guests and Matt and Chief Todd just one last, if they had last thoughts they wanted to share, and then I want to close out with just one other thing. So, Chief, if you want to start us off here.
This is I feel like at this point you should recognize giving me a microphone is like a bad idea.
That was in the budget meeting. I recognize that too.
Yeah, like I just there's something sensual about it. No. All right. Hey, everyone's kuleana. That's my message to you. It is not a fire department problem. It's not a politician, county government problem. It's an everybody problem. Like we are on the same boat. We got to paddle together, and preferably in the same direction. Otherwise, you end up going in circles. But ultimately, everyone here has a responsibility to look at their own homes, their neighbors' homes, their friends, and try to get them to be a little bit safer, because it all matters. For those of you actively working on that, and I know you, and you know me probably because we've met in many a meeting before. Appreciate all of you. The time and effort put in. It does matter, I think that the potential future is fraught with potential issues. There's a super vague there. I'm worried about like the federal government. I'm worried about a variety of other things going on. I think we got to take our own future into our hands, and I think we got to put in the time and effort. And I think it's a worthy cause. It's one of the reasons I enjoyed working in the fire department. Our mission statement is being changed by me to this one, but basically save life and property, safeguard the community, serve the public with aloha. And it's an honor to serve. It's an honor to be your fire chief. It's the reason, I really enjoy going to work, which makes no sense because you would not believe the number of emails and meetings I have to sit in. No one should enjoy that. But it's an opportunity to try and make a difference, and we're all going to the same place. So while we're here, I think it's how we spend our time matters, and I think the time spent doing this kind of stuff, talking about how we make our communities and our neighbors better and safer. I think there's nothing better that we could be doing. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you all for being here. Take your kuleana in your hand and go forth and pull some weeds. Something like that.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming. You all are what makes this possible. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, Chief Todd. Really want to thank everyone for being here this evening. There's just a couple last kind of things to put on your calendar. One, not necessarily so much, but it is ongoing. The last day to comment is Wednesday. So the planning department, along with civil defense, is going to be conducting, well, is hoping to conduct, and it looks promising, to have an evacuation analysis for Waikoloa Village. This is really inclusive of all the different assets and pieces of Waikoloa Village. So this is something that will be forthcoming. There have been some reallocation of funds from some, federal dollars with HUD that's already been given to the county, but we're just basically reallocating it towards an evacuation analysis for Waikoloa Village. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on Hawaiian Electric, they are going to be doing some aerial inspections. You may have seen a press release on this. They're going to do some aerial inspections of their major transmission lines across the island. So you could be experiencing some low-flying vehicles, helicopters, and so forth. and that's going to happen from May 5th to May 8th. So kind of next week, you're going to maybe see some impacts in the community. So don't be alarmed, but they're kind of looking and inspecting their equipment and assets out in the community. And then I also wanted to mention that we were hoping to, with the partnership of Wildfire Safety Advocates in the month of June, to have Hawaiian Electric in this kind of similar conversation. So we're building that kind of what that's going to look like. Could be kind of a fair sort of thing, or it could be a conversation like this. So we're working on that piece, and we'll share that out through the community here. And then the last piece I wanted to share was next week, I'll be holding a series of community talk stories and sessions, listening sessions, town halls, what you want to call it, with some of our state legislators. So the state legislator they're adjourning for the summer at the end of this week. And so it'll be a good opportunity to ask our state legislators about their work that's happened over the last spring, what they've been doing, what they've been working on. So next week, Tuesday, we'll be here back in Waikoloa Village, here at the cafeteria, starting at 5:30 that evening. Myself, Representative Tarnas, Representative Lowen, and Senator Richards. So the four of us will be up here answering your questions, kind of sharing our thoughts about what's been going on here at the state level, and then sharing some county updates as well. So that's the first one. Then we'll be up in Waimea. We'll have Councilmember Kimball join us there, and Rep. Lowen will step out, and then we'll be up in North Kohala for another one with Senator Richards and Rep. Tarnas. So an opportunity to learn about the work that they've been doing and kind of engage with you, an opportunity to ask your questions and have your questions answered. Thank you. Thanks for letting me share that. And I really do appreciate you all being here this evening. I want to mahalo Chief Todd for spending this long evening with us here. And mahalo to Matt Chalker and the Wildfire Safety Advocates of Waikoloa. Always appreciate the updates from Hawaii Wildfire Management. Thank you so much. Thank you. And our valiant police officers have been with us here for a while too, so thank you, Captain, Officer. Really appreciate you. And I want to thank all of our community partners here. As I mentioned, this is really our responsibility, Kako, our kuleana together on working and solving these issues. So we're going to close it here. I want to thank you all for being here. Please enjoy any snacks in the back on your way out. We'll stick around for a little while longer. Thank you so much. Mahalo nui.